September 1915. The air in the small laboratory at the College of Hawaii is thick and heavy, a mixture of tropical humidity and the sharp, acrid scent of chemical reagents. Outside, the Pacific sun beats down, but inside, a singular focus cuts through the stillness. Here, Alice Ball, at just 23 years old, stands over a complex arrangement of glass beakers and distillation tubes. She is the first woman and the first African American to earn a master's degree in chemistry from this institution, and she is on the precipice of achieving what centuries of medicine had deemed impossible. Her challenge is leprosy, or Hansen's disease, a name that was not merely a diagnosis but a social death sentence. For millennia, its victims were cast out, their bodies slowly ravaged by a bacterium that caused nerve damage, disfigurement, and blindness. In Hawaii, this sentence was literal. Thousands were exiled to the remote Kalaupapa Peninsula on the island of Molokai, a place of profound beauty and unimaginable suffering, a prison with no walls but the sea. The only known treatment was an ancient remedy, oil from the seeds of the chalmugra tree. But it was a cruel hope. The oil was a thick, viscous substance, too sticky for injection and agonizing to take orally, inducing violent vomiting that left patients weaker than before. Many chose the disease over the cure. This is the problem that consumed Alice Ball. She saw not an intractable curse, but a chemical puzzle. The active compounds in chalmugra oil were fatty acids, but they were locked away, insoluble in water, making them biologically useless for effective delivery into the bloodstream. Dr. Harry T. Howman, a physician at the Kalihi Hospital who was desperately seeking a better treatment, had seen the spark of genius in his young research assistant. He had tasked her with this monumental challenge: find a way to tame the oil. While others had failed, Ball approached the problem with a methodical brilliance that defied her age. She hypothesized that if she could isolate the active compounds, the chalmugric and hydrocarpic acids, and convert them into a different chemical form, she could make them water-soluble. Her chosen method was elegant and precise: esterification. She meticulously treated the fatty acids with ethanol, creating ethyl esters. This chemical transformation was the key. The resulting solution was thin, light, and most importantly, absorbable by the human body. It could be injected directly into the bloodstream, delivering the healing compounds to the site of the infection without the horrific side effects. It was a breakthrough of staggering proportions. Her technique, which would become known as the Ball method, was revolutionary. She had engineered the world's first effective injectable treatment for leprosy. The initial results from patients at Kalihi were nothing short of miraculous. For the first time, people were not just managing their symptoms, they were being discharged, their disease in remission, their lives given back to them. They could leave the isolation of Kalaupapa and return to their families. At 23, Alice Ball had handed the world a cure for one of its most feared diseases. She was preparing to publish her findings, a step that would have secured her place in the annals of medical history and brought her global recognition. But history is a fragile record, easily torn, easily rewritten. In December of 1916, at the age of 24, Alice Ball fell ill and died suddenly, likely from inhaling chlorine gas during a lab demonstration. Her life's work, documented in her laboratory notes but not yet formally published under her name, was left vulnerable. The university and the world had lost a brilliant mind. And in the vacuum of her absence, an opportunist saw his chance. Dr. Arthur Dean, a chemist and the president of the University of Hawaii, had overseen Ball's work. Within months of her death, he continued her research, mass-produced the injectable solution, and published the findings. He called it the Dean method. Newspapers and medical journals lauded his genius. He became a hero. The university celebrated its president, the man who had conquered leprosy. And Alice Ball? Her name was nowhere to be found. How does a discovery that changes the world get stolen in plain sight and its true author simply erased? Following that profound injustice, the treatment born in Alice Ball's lab rapidly spread across the globe, but her name remained buried. The Dean method became the gold standard, the only viable weapon against Hansen's disease for nearly 3 decades, until the advent of sulfone drugs in the 1940s. Its impact was immediate and undeniable. We can see it in the archives. In the brittle, yellowed patient records from Kalopapa, doctors documented astonishing recoveries. A report from 1921 details dozens of patients, once considered terminal, being declared bacteriologically negative and allowed to leave the settlement. These were not just statistics, they were reunions, futures restored. Medical journals from London to Tokyo published articles celebrating the breakthrough. A 1925 piece in Capilena praises the remarkable efficacy of the ethyl esters of Chaumogra oil, as refined by the Dean method. A photograph from a clinic in the Philippines shows smiling children, once ostracized, now playing together, their skin showing clear signs of healing. The world was witnessing a medical miracle, and every single publication, every grant application, every newspaper headline credited one man, Arthur Dean. Yet, not a single one credits Ball. Her contribution was not just minimized, it was methodically and completely obliterated. This was not a simple oversight. It was a calculated act of appropriation, enabled by a system built on exclusion. Arthur Dean was not just a chemist, he was the president of the University of Hawaii. He held immense institutional power. He controlled the flow of information, the university's publications, and its public narrative. When he put his name on her work, who was there to challenge him? Alice Ball was a young, deceased African-American woman in an era where the contributions of people like her were systematically devalued. The academic and scientific communities of the early 20th century were bastions of white male authority. A woman's work, especially in a collaborative lab setting, was often considered assistive by default. Her intellectual labor absorbed into the reputation of her male supervisor. For an African-American woman, this barrier was exponentially higher. The prevailing racial and gender biases of the time created a reality where it was not just possible, but plausible, even expected, that a man of Dean's stature would be the genius behind such a discovery. He leveraged this systemic prejudice to his full advantage. He reaped the accolades, the professional prestige, and the financial rewards that came with the Dean method. He built a legacy on a foundation of stolen work, secure in the knowledge that the person he stole from had no voice to cry foul. The system wasn't just complicit, it was the very tool of the theft. It was designed to amplify voices like Dean's and silence voices like Ball's. The silence surrounding her name in the archives isn't an absence of information, it is the evidence of her erasure. It makes you wonder, as you sift through these documents that praise the fruit of her mind, what other truths lie buried in the footnotes of history? How many more breakthroughs were attributed to the wrong person simply because of their position or privilege? Building on decades of silence, the first cracks in the carefully constructed facade of the Dean method began to appear, not from a powerful institution, but from the conscience of a single man. Dr. Harry Holman, the physician who had first recognized Alice Ball's talent and enlisted her help, was haunted by the injustice. He knew the truth. In 1922, just 6 years after her death, Holman published a paper in The. It was a quiet act of rebellion, a lone voice against a chorus of praise for Dean. In his paper, he meticulously detailed the process of creating the injectable solution and gave it a name, the Ball method. He wrote, "After a great deal of experimental work, Miss Ball solved the problem for me." It was the first and, for a very long time, the only official document to set the record straight. But in the 1920s, his correction was largely ignored, a footnote drowned out by the fame of the university president. The Dean method remained the accepted name, and Alice Ball's story faded back into obscurity. For 50 years, the lie held. But a truth, once spoken, can echo. In the 1970s, as the civil rights and feminist movements spurred a re-examination of history, scholars began looking for the stories that had been erased. Researchers at the University of Hawaii, including Professor Catherine Takara and retired chemist Stanley Ali, stumbled upon Holman's 1922 paper. It was the smoking gun. Armed with Holman's testimony, they dug into the university archives, unearthing the documents that Dean had so effectively suppressed. They found Ball's original research notes, her precise chemical formulas, and correspondence that corroborated Holman's account. The evidence was irrefutable. Her meticulous, step-by-step process for isolating the FO esters was the exact foundation of the so-called Dean method. The decades-long deception was finally laid bare. The slow, arduous process of restoring her legacy began. It took another 30 years, but the momentum was unstoppable. In 2000, the University of Hawaii finally acknowledged its historic failure. They placed a bronze plaque in her honor on the campus's lone Shalmuger tree, the very source of her breakthrough. The plaque reads, in part, "She is credited with developing the first successful treatment for Hansen's disease." That same year, the Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii declared February 29th Alice Ball Day, an honor celebrated every leap year. In 2007, the University Board of Regents posthumously awarded her their highest honor, the Regents Medal of Distinction. Her story is now taught to chemistry students at the university where her legacy was once erased. The restoration of Alice Ball's name is more than a historical correction. It is a profound lesson in the nature of scientific credit and the persistent fight for justice. Her story serves as a stark reminder that history is not a passive record of events. It is an active narrative shaped by power, prejudice, and sometimes the determined work of those who refuse to let the truth stay buried. Her genius cured thousands and laid the groundwork for future antibiotic development. The world needed her mind, but the system that should have celebrated her instead tried to erase her. Remembering Alice Ball is not just about giving credit where it is due. It is about reclaiming the inspirational power of her story for a new generation of scientists, especially women and people of color, who continue to break down barriers. It forces us to ask whose names we are still not hearing and what brilliance we are losing when we allow history to be written only by the powerful. Her genius cured thousands and laid the groundwork for future antibiotic development. The world needed her mind, but the system that should have celebrated her instead tried to erase her. Remembering Alice Ball is not just about giving credit where it is due. It is about reclaiming the inspirational power of her story for a new generation of scientists, especially women and people of color who continue to break down barriers. It forces us to ask whose names we are still not hearing and what brilliance we are losing when we allow history to be written only by the powerful.